4, 3, 2, 1.
July 20th, 1969. An unforgettable moment in human history. Apollo 11 astronaut Neil Armstrong set foot on the gray soil of the moon and declared, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." A roar of celebration erupted in the mission control room in Houston. The entire world, nearly 600 million people, watched America's historic victory on their television sets. Amidst the intense tensions of the Cold War, the United States had proven its technological and ideological superiority by surpassing the Soviet Union in the space race. But who were the true architects behind this American victory? In the Launch Control Center at Cape Kennedy, Florida, the man in the launch director's chair was Dr. Kurt DeBoos, who spoke with a distinct German accent. And the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket, the centerpiece of the entire mission and the most powerful machine in human history, was Dr. Wernher von Braun, another German. They were part of a group of German scientists, many of whom, just 25 years earlier, had been building death weapons or vengeance weapons for Adolf Hitler. But how did Nazi Germany's most talented and controversial scientists become American national heroes? How was their dark past erased and put to use in fulfilling the American dream? This is the story of that secret mission, codenamed Operation Paperclip. This story begins on the battlefields of World War II at a secret research center called Peenemünde, located on Germany's Baltic Sea coast. This was the heart of the German Army's rocket research. And it was here that a technology was born that would forever change the course of future warfare and space travel. At the center of this research facility was a young, ambitious engineer from an aristocratic family, Wernher von Braun. Having dreamed of space travel since childhood, von Braun's extraordinary talent and leadership skills earned him the position of technical director of Peenemünde at a very young age. Under his leadership, a team of brilliant engineers and scientists developed the world's first long-range ballistic missile, technically known as the A4. But in the frenzy of war, von Braun's dream of space travel was transformed into a terrifying weapon of mass destruction. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels named it the Vergeltungswaffe 2, or V2, meaning Vengeance Weapon 2. The V2 was a technological marvel. It was a 46-foot-long rocket powered by liquid fuel. Using a gyroscope-based guidance system, it could soar to an altitude of nearly 90 kilometers at more than 5 times the speed of sound, carrying a 1-ton explosive payload to strike targets hundreds of miles away. Its speed was so great that it was impossible to get any warning before it struck. From 1944 until the end of the war, over 3,000 V2 rockets were launched at cities like London, Antwerp, and Paris, killing nearly 9,000 civilians. It was a terrifying weapon designed to break the morale of the Allied forces. But behind this technology lay an even deeper and darker reality. These V2 rockets were manufactured in a massive underground factory called Mittelwerk, located inside Germany's Harz Mountains. The laborers here were thousands of prisoners of war from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp, Russians, Poles, French, and citizens of other nations. Due to inhumane labor, days spent in an environment without light or air, starvation, and the brutal torture by Nazi SS guards. Shockingly, more than twice as many people died building the V2 rocket than were killed by its attacks. Wernher von Braun, who personally visited this factory, was fully aware of the use of this slave labor. This moral compromise has forever made him a controversial figure. Spring 1945, the fall of the Third Reich was only a matter of time. With Germany's defeat certain, a new race began among the Allied powers, a race to capture German technology and its scientists. The Soviet Union was advancing rapidly from the east. Their main objective was to capture Peenemünde and von Braun's rocket team. The head of the Soviets' own rocket program, Sergei Korolev, a brilliant engineer who had himself survived Stalin's Gulag labor camps, knew that this German technology would be the key to the future space race. The Soviet trophy brigades were desperate to seize German technology. Meanwhile, American troops were advancing from the west. In this situation, Wernher von Braun made the most important decision of his life. He and his top scientists decided it was better to surrender to the Americans than to be captured by the Soviets. He knew the Soviets would see them as war criminals and perhaps send them to Siberia, but the Americans might view their knowledge as a valuable asset, one that could help him fulfill his dream of space travel. In a dramatic plan, von Braun arranged for the surrender of himself and about 500 of his top scientists and engineers to the Americans. His younger brother, Magnus von Braun, was sent on a bicycle to find American troops. During the surrender, von Braun played his trump card, a list of Germany's 126 best rocket scientists, all ready to work for America. Not only that, but they had also hidden all their technical designs, blueprints, and research papers in an abandoned salt mine, and they passed this information to the Americans. The Americans did not let this opportunity slip. They quickly recovered nearly 14 tons of documents from the mine. Additionally, they recovered parts for about 100 complete V-2 rockets from the Mittelwerk factory and shipped them to America in 300 train wagons. All of this was done with extreme haste, as according to the Yalta Agreement, the region was soon to come under Soviet control. After the German scientists set foot on American soil, a new plan for their future began. The US military understood that the knowledge of these scientists would provide a huge strategic advantage against the Soviet Union in the looming Cold War. To this end, the US Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, initiated a secret program, initially named Operation Overcast. It was later renamed Operation Paperclip. Its official objectives were twofold. First, to prevent German scientific expertise from falling into the hands of the Soviet Union, and second, to use this knowledge for America's own military and technological research. But there was a major ethical and political obstacle. President Harry Truman had issued a clear directive that no active Nazi or anyone involved in war crimes could be included in the program. However, many members of von Braun's team were official members of the Nazi Party, and even von Braun himself was a major in the Nazi elite force, the SS. To overcome this hurdle, US intelligence agencies chose a clever and unethical path. They began to systematically sanitize the scientists' files, erasing evidence of their Nazi affiliations and war crimes. Their old resumes were removed and replaced with new, clean ones, which were attached to the file with a paperclip. This process gave the entire operation its name, Operation Paperclip. Through this, nearly 1,600 German scientists and engineers, including Werner von Braun, Kurt de Boos, and Arthur Rudolph, had their pasts erased and were given a new life in America, where their knowledge would be used in the name of national security. The German scientists' first home was Fort Bliss in Texas and the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. In the hot American desert, they began the work of reassembling and launching their captured V-2 rockets. These tests provided an invaluable opportunity for American engineers and scientists to understand rocket technology. However, the daily life of the German scientists and engineers was like that of a prisoner in a golden cage. Although they received good salaries and amenities, their movements were restricted, and there was much suspicion and mistrust among their American colleagues. After all, just a few months earlier, they had been the enemy, but gradually, due to their extraordinary knowledge and professionalism, they began to earn respect. Later, von Braun's entire team was transferred to the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. Under their leadership, this small town soon became known as Rocket City and the epicenter of America's missile and space programs. Here, they formed the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, and developed America's first reliable ballistic missile, the Redstone rocket. For several years, von Braun's team was primarily engaged in developing military missiles, but one event changed the entire situation. October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union successfully launched the world's first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1. The beep-beep sound of this small metal sphere was a huge psychological blow to the United States. It was a direct challenge to America's claim of technological superiority. Americans were stunned by fear and shame. They realized they had fallen behind the Soviets in the space race. To overcome this Sputnik crisis, the US government acted swiftly. In 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was created. Suddenly, Werner von Braun and his German team became a national asset. Previously, the US Navy's own Vanguard rocket had attempted to launch America's first satellite. It exploded horrifically during a live television broadcast, earning the nickname Flopnik. After this failure, the government reluctantly turned to von Braun's team, and they succeeded. On January 31, 1958, von Braun's team used their Juno I rocket, a modified version of the Redstone missile, to successfully launch America's first satellite, Explorer 1. America was back in the space race, and von Braun became America's new space hero. The space race then entered a new dimension. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made his historic announcement before Congress that America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The responsibility for making this impossible feat possible was given to Wernher von Braun and his team, who by then were working under NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. And as the vehicle for this dream, they created the most powerful and complex machine in human history, the Saturn V rocket. The Saturn V was the ultimate masterpiece of engineering. It stood 363 feet tall, higher than the Statue of Liberty, and weighed as much as 30 Boeing 747 jets. Its 5 F1 engines in the first stage collectively generated 7.6 million pounds of thrust, equivalent to 160 million horsepower. The sound it produced during liftoff was one of the loudest man-made sounds ever. It was a 3-stage rocket designed to propel the Apollo spacecraft beyond Earth's orbit and toward the moon, nearly 250,000 miles away. The chief architect of this rocket was von Braun, and its program director was another paperclip scientist, Arthur Rudolph. And as the director of the Kennedy Space Center, Kurt DeBoos was in charge of launching every Apollo mission. Building on the success of the Saturn V, the Apollo program progressed step by step, and finally, on July 20, 1969, with the Apollo 11 mission, humanity fulfilled its dream of conquering the moon. The dream Wernher von Braun had as a teenager was finally realized under the American flag. After the success of the Apollo missions, Wernher von Braun and his colleagues became American national heroes. Their pictures were on the cover of Time magazine, they hosted television shows about space for Disney, and to the American public, they became the visionaries of the space age. But hidden beneath the light of their success was their dark past. In the 1970s and 80s, journalists and historians began to investigate the secret files of Operation Paperclip and brought evidence of the scientists' Nazi affiliations to public attention. The case of Arthur Rudolph, in particular, sparked huge controversy. He had been the production director of the Mittelwerk factory, where thousands of slave laborers were forced to work under inhumane conditions. When the U.S. Department of Justice opened an investigation against him in the 1980s, Rudolph was forced to renounce his U.S. citizenship and return to Germany to avoid facing trial for war crimes. These events brought the core ethical question behind Operation Paperclip to the forefront. Is it justifiable to compromise with individuals involved in war crimes to achieve national security and technological superiority? Is scientific achievement separate from the scientists' morality? On one side was the realist argument, which held that if the US had not taken these scientists, the Soviet Union would have, which would have been even more dangerous for America in the Cold War. On the other side was the question of ethics, which states that crimes against humanity should never be overlooked under any circumstances. The impact of Operation Paperclip is undeniable. Without the knowledge and expertise of Wernher von Braun and his German team, it would have been nearly impossible for America to reach the moon in 1969. They helped America win the space race and advanced its technology by decades, but its legacy is extremely complex. On one hand, it is a story of humanity's indomitable curiosity and extraordinary scientific achievement. On the other hand, it is a reflection of the grim reality of the Cold War, where ethics were often subordinated to national interest. America's lunar victory was a crowning moment of the Cold War, but behind its light lay a deep and uncomfortable darkness from World War II. Operation Paperclip reminds us that the victories of history are often complex, and the stories of its heroes are not always black and white.